Please take your seats. Okay, good evening once again, everybody. Good evening to those watching via live stream. We are moving into the open portion of our agenda this evening. In a moment, I'm going to read a statement, and then the process will follow. We'll be introducing our superintendent finalist. This is Debra Boyd, current associate superintendent of the Tantasqua Union 61 District. Mrs. Boyd will receive the floor. At the conclusion of Mrs. Boyd's opening statement, we will then open the floor for school committee members to ask questions. Mrs. Boyd will stay as long as we have questions to ask her. At the conclusion of those questions, we will thank Mrs. Boyd for her time, and then I will recognize Mrs. Kate Alexander to offer a statement on behalf of the interview committee, and our proceedings for the evening will continue. So first and foremost, I just want to say and be real clear, the Tantasqua Regional and Union 61 school committees have conducted a fair, transparent interview process that has complied with the open meeting law and Governor Charlie Baker's executive order. As outlined in Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 59, it is the responsibility of the school committee and the school committee alone to hire a superintendent. At multiple points in the Tantasqua and Union 61 history, the hiring of the superintendent has generally been handled via internal search. In some instances, the committee has foregone a search and simply elevated and promoted internal candidates. 10 years ago, an external search, which I chaired, was conducted and ultimately led to the elevation of an internal candidate, our current superintendent, Dr. Aaron Nosek. Of the last 4 superintendents, 3 were internal candidates, only 1 was external, and they lasted just the duration of 1 single contract. Given the intricacies of the districts that mitigate towards an internal process, I believe our history and the rationale behind our decision on December 15th speaks for itself. The process that we've been engaged in was adopted 3.5 months ago unanimously by this joint body. Some important points that were considered by the joint committee and discussed at the December 15th joint meeting and subsequently confirmed. Mr. Glenn Kuchar, the executive director of the MASC, in fact discouraged an external search given the intricacies of the Tantasqua and Union 61 districts and the shallow pool of candidates that were currently available. His recommendation was to proceed with an internal search first to determine if a viable candidate existed internally and spare the communities of our 5 towns the cost of an external search that would, in his opinion, not yield fruitful results. A number of districts that he is actively engaged with have, in fact, gone out and done external searches to only then determine that their internal candidate was the most viable. In addition, that district that he's been involved in that did not have an internal candidate apply, they have proceeded to an interim and are going to continue to evaluate the field in a year. Again, given the intricacies of the district and the committee's desire for a smooth transition period, the internal search was initiated well in advance of Dr. Nosek's impending retirement next January. An interview committee was established with each town and each school represented. In addition, sticking with the same approach used 10 years ago, we invited 2 staff members to join our interview committee to ensure a staff perspective was at the table. That's Tracy Carboni, a longtime veteran of the Tantasqua High School Math Department, and Kathy Pelly, the principal of Burgess Elementary. Regarding public involvement, it is the school committee's responsibility to appoint a superintendent per Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 59. This is a public meeting, and like our last meeting on December 15th, we have streamlined these meetings to ensure the public does in fact have access. Public having access, however, is not the same as the public having participatory rights. Public meetings are not public hearings. The public's voice in this process is through their elected representatives, of whom are sitting around this table. The committee tonight has the evening to ask our recommended finalist, Mrs. Boyd, any appropriate questions publicly that they feel necessary. At the conclusion of the public interview, the committee will move to public deliberations. This committee, and this committee alone, will ultimately decide our next steps and ultimately will decide who leads this district after Dr. Nozick's retirement. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to the joint committees our superintendent finalist candidate, Mrs. Debra Boyd, Associate Superintendent for Tantasqua and Union 61. Mrs. Boyd, good evening. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all. I'm honored to be considered a finalist for the position. They are very big shoes to fill. And I certainly understand how important a decision this is. It is one of the most important decisions of any school committee. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes and let you know why I believe I am the best person to take over when Dr. Nozick leaves. First and foremost, I know our district. I love our district. Correction, 6 districts. We couldn't be more complicated. 6 school districts, 7 school buildings, 8 schools. Technically, according to Department of Ed, there are 2 that sit in this building. 6 school committees, 34 school committee members, 5 towns, 5 boards of selectmen, 5 finance committees, one of them is actually advisory committee, and 2 counties. There's no other district in the state made up like this or even close. It is extremely complex. A dear friend administrator, when I first started 20 years ago, said within my first 2 weeks to me, you just can't know until you've lived it. And I have never forgotten that. It is so true. Until you've actually lived in this district and worked through the complexities, you just don't understand it. And on a regular basis, even the Department of Ed doesn't get us. But we keep working to help them get it. And yet I have been on a team that has worked and succeeded for years in making it look a little less complicated behind the scenes. We know we have parents very often that have no idea that their child is leaving a school district at the end of 6th grade and walking into a different school district. And I thank you all for actually helping that. You all have worked with us administrators to endorse and support having almost the same policies. You don't have to. At the elementary level, you've agreed to support the same curriculum materials. You don't have to. But we definitely do the work behind the scenes to make it work best for our students, most importantly, and for the families and for the taxpayers. We've been doing it for years, and I'm very proud of the district and how we get it done. Seamless is a good thing. We all know what's going on behind the scenes. I also know each of our school, I know our school buildings. I know each of the buildings and their cultures and what they're proud of and what their uniqueness is. I know that the Bears and the Eagles and the Wizards and the White Tigers become warriors. I did not forget one. We have 2 schools that are Bears. So these things are certainly important to every school district, the little uniques, the cultures. I know the towns. I know at the town meetings what the hot buttons are going to be, what the articles of interest are going to be. Each town has different issues. We have quite a variety of makeup in our town, some commercial, some not, and that really comes into play when it comes to trying to support the schools. And our towns have been extremely supportive of our schools. And finally, I know our staff. I know the talent in our staff, all the staff and the administrators. And you have all done a phenomenal job in the past year. I hope you never get tired of hearing what an awesome job we did with such horrible decisions to make. It was a tough year. It was a difficult year. It was difficult for you and administrators at the very beginning when you were forced to make the best bad choice on a model, and it's been an entire year of us given bad choices to make and having to make the best one. It's been a long time since we were given 2 really good options to choose between. I'm hoping we're coming out of that and moving forward. The staff has been phenomenal. I cannot thank all of them enough. the pivoting and the changing and the difficulties no one could imagine for the teachers, the classroom support, the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, and the custodians. It was difficult for everyone, and most of all, our kids and their family. Even though we are proud of what I think is the best model we could have come up with, I think the best model in the area and gave the most in-person teaching that we could do safely, the kids deserve more. They absolutely deserve more. And now it's time, I believe we are on the cusp of hopefully moving to the next phase. Recovery, getting back some joy. We've been doing what we have to do, but there's been very minimal joy in both the adult end and the students' end. So I'm really looking forward to starting with this week. Well, many of our elementary schools were darn close, if not already all in. But to be all in starting yesterday, and the kids are happy, and every day gets a little better as we talk to the principals, and it will continue to. So from a recovery point of view, that's where we need to be. And next year, we don't have time to wait. We need to hit the ground running. We need to continue what we're starting this week and over the next couple of weeks. We've got to make sure we keep safety in mind in the buildings, but we've got to put a whole lot of work and planning into remediation programs, getting our students who have slipped back, not to where they were, but forward, making sure that we don't forget about the need for mental health services for both the students and the adults. This has been such an anxiety-ridden year for both, and we can't forget that. So that is what next year has got to be about, and I feel confident that I can lead us into that. I have already started having conversations with our local community officials to make sure they know what we need from them, not only financially, but emotionally. We need the support from our communities to do what we've got to do next. And finally, I would remind us all that while we're doing this, recovering and moving forward, we as a school committee and community have to get back to figuring out what the next strategic plan for Tantasqua and Union 61 is. The last strategic plan we had was a 2020 mission vision, and it expired last year. We started in October of 2019 having a retreat and getting ready to go through the process. We've got to do that. We've got to have, and I hope that you will let me lead the group when we have school committee members and students and staff and community members come together and start talking about what Tantasqua Union 61 2030 looks like, because we've got to get that done. There's a lot of good stuff to come.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyd. At this time, we'll entertain questions for Mrs. Boyd. Any school committee member is permitted. Just raise your hand. Mr. Haggerty.
I would like to ask what you see from your experience in the district, what you see are some of the challenges in the immediate future for the district.
And as I referred to a little bit, obviously the immediate challenge is getting all students in, getting staff in, getting them comfortable being in. The stress level and the anxiety is definitely something we cannot ignore. We can't pretend it's not there and just say, we're turning the lights on. So we've got to deal with that. We're going to have, pretty quickly, we're all going to need to make decisions about what we do with federal grant funds that have about a 2-year shelf life. So we do have some funding to help us do everything that we want to do, but we've got to decide pretty quickly, what is that? How are we going to fund it? Is it going to be remediation programs? How is it going to be staffing? When we bring on staff with grant funding, we have to remember we start building a little cliff, and what happens in 2 or 3 years if we've brought on new staff. So I think that is in the next 3 to 4 month challenge, because those decisions have to be made before we start the new school year. And then the challenge is really going to be to figure out during all of next year how to dipstick and test how are we doing, how are the kids doing. We have certainly always had school-based assessments that we can be running regularly to see how we're doing academically. Mental health is going to be something that's entirely different to the level that we're used to. We're going to be ramped up, and needing to make sure we keep gauging with the staff to see. On the positive, though, the challenge is, I think, a positive challenge will be, we have an awesome opportunity from a technology point of view. We have been forced and thrown into a technology world that we might have gone a little slower to. And I had started years ago trying to bring technology into the schools, starting with one summer, giving every teacher who wanted an iPad to take home and start working with and playing and seeing what kind of lesson plans they could come up with. So we've been inching our way toward one-to-one or close to one-to-one. We added 1,000 more Chromebooks district-wide since last March. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do with them when they're not simply for remote learning.
Thank you.
Mr. Edwin. Other questions? I'll ask one. Mrs. Boyd, you've heard comments, I'm sure, in the past. Well, she hasn't taught. She's never been in the classroom. Your reaction to that, and maybe talk about your diverse experiences beyond the classroom that set you up for this position.
Sure. I have not taught. I have been in the classrooms. I have been in the classrooms for 20 years. I do not just sit in my office and crunch numbers. I actually, one of the things I am most proud of is bringing to this district instructional rounds after going to another district and seeing the practice of instructional rounds. I know very well the teachers' evaluation tools. I know the standards, I know the indicators, and I myself am evaluated on the same standards. But instructional rounds was something that I did lead into bringing into us, which is a program in which our administrators across all 6 school districts, all 7 schools, rotate through. They did not happen this year, and I miss them terribly, so we will be going back. But we rotate through each month. 1 or 2 schools will choose to host for, say, a 2-hour session. And a handful of administrators will go to the school and with the principal, whoever the principal hosting is at the time, walk us through, quietly, not disturbing instruction, a number of classrooms. We choose one particular standard or indicator to be focusing on for that particular time. And when we're done, we sit in a room as administrators and talk through what we saw. It is not about talking about evaluating a teacher. It is about what kinds of things did we see, what tools did we see, how engaged were the students, depending on the indicator, and really making sure that we as administrators see good teaching the same. And there have been some great robust conversations where one principal will say, well, I caught this, did you catch that? No, I did not. Or maybe the teacher could have gone, tried this route to deal with a particular issue or subject matter. So they've been really good conversations. I think they're good for the hosting principals, as well as good for those who are traveling from one school to another. I think it is so important for our principals and staff. If I had all the money in the world, I would have staff going on field trips to other schools in our district all the time to see, especially when you talk about secondary versus elementary. They need to see where the kids came from. They need to see where they're going to go. So that would be my response. I have absolutely been in the classroom. I know how to support teachers, and I know good teachers.
Mrs. Bonner.
Yeah, I wondered, Deb, I know you've been intimately involved with all the COVID and stuff. And I wonder what you think our schools have learned from COVID and what we don't want anything to do with going forward. Are there good things and bad things?
Let me just repeat that for the folks at home. So the question related for Mrs. Barnacle related to what have we learned from COVID?
Yes.
I truly hope that most of our staff learned that they are far more resilient than they ever thought they would be. I think that too. I don't know anyone that would have put money down in August, even when we chose our model. Is there anyone here that wants to raise their hand and think we were not going to be shut down by November or December? Who, honestly, there's a lesson there. The optimism or the persistent really does pay off. It was absolutely painful. and it was quite challenging. But I do believe it was the right thing. And again, I feel for our kids, because when I say it was the right thing for our kids, I'm still sitting here knowing our kids don't feel like right was done by them. But we really did the best that we could. I think, again, it wasn't something new. It was the reminder that we just have to think out of the box. We can't just feel like we're stuck in the box. I'm going to say right now, Dr. Nozick, applaud her. She is the woman that said, hybrid equals a week on and a week off. It doesn't have to be this week, 1 week somehow split in two. That would have been a mess. It was a mess for our neighbors. 1 week in, 1 week off still equals equal time and hybrid. And that paid off so many times over and over again. So those, really was the optimistic think out of the box. It's hard for me, quite frankly, right now to think of what to throw out, because most of it we want to throw out. Seriously.
Mr. Cohen.
Building on that topic, what do you think the biggest challenges coming out of this, back into some sort of normalcy, every child coming back to school next year?
Yeah.
So the question was, biggest challenge coming out of the COVID situation and moving into quote-unquote normal? I got you, Jen, I know.
We'd be fools if we I'm trying to be Sally Sunshine. I want to say, Sally Sunshine says we're coming in on August 30th. Everything's going to be exactly the same as it was a year and a half ago, except we'll be wearing masks. That's probably a little unreasonable. I think our challenge will be making sure we don't forget we will have folks coming in that have not been in a building in a year and a half, for both teaching staff and students, and we've got to prepare for how to deal with that. And even those who have been in the building, it hasn't been a fabulous experience. There's going to be, the challenge is making sure, the challenge is getting all of those people to feel comfortable coming in. And it's keeping up with the sanitation and the PPE, but it's very likely tightening our 6 foot down to 3. And we've got to find a way to get folks to be comfortable with that, to assure them that we respect the space needed. We quote, respect the virus. Let's hope the virus is, pretty level by then. But I think the challenge is just going to be reminding ourselves it's not all in. It's just not an easy flip the switch and we're all coming down.
Is that good, Eva? Is there a question down there? Andy?
What are your thoughts on how we best support people mentally and emotionally health school? It seems like we've taken a step backwards with yourself through the pandemic. And is it just, how do you think about it? Is it just adding additional staff or having staff who are focused on that particular area? Or potentially training teachers, staff, in ways to recognize and possibly help kids with that traffic?
Yeah, I certainly think, well, I'm grateful that a couple of years ago we all had the major push for SEL, for social emotional learning. I think that's going to pay off. We're going to have to make sure we get back to that. It's interesting, one of the principals who's not here was talking a month or two ago about how strange it is because the littlest kids, the kindergartners who are in, normally part of their initial training is how to share. We're not sharing. We're in this don't touch each other's stuff. So what is that going to mean in a year or two when we try to get back to social emotional learning? I certainly do think, off the cuff, don't hold me to it, any of you, I certainly think you're going to see recommendations to need more adjustment counselors. To be available and to help us build programs and tell us how we can best serve both populations, adult and students.
Carolyn?
Hearing about children who've fallen behind and for whom the experience has been very, very difficult, have we been able to assess at this point how many of our kids are in trouble that way, or will we have something that we're doing once schools start?
We have done some assessment. We have done some, we've always done some local school assessments. We don't rely just on it. So there is some assessment already going on, and our staff is absolutely using that data and doing what they can. It'll be very easy to get some baselines once we get them all in. I will take that question as an opportunity in case anybody was going to ask on MCAS. MCAS has never been for us an end-all. Obviously, it's a legislative requirement. This year, I know, I'm waiting for the question, what do you think about MCAS this year? I mean, the bottom line is at this point in time, we need to take MCAS because it's a federal requirement. This assessment at this point in time, some kind of assessment is a federal requirement. I think we've been given language and tools and know that we're giving it mostly for the sake of giving it, and hopefully we can use it for some benchmark. Is it going to be as reliable and robust as any other year when all of a sudden now you can actually do some of it remotely? No, but we'll use it for what we can use it for. It'll just be another data point for us to be able to look at.
I want to shift gears, and my question is a little bit more administrative, kind of more business-like. I'm wondering, if you are voted as the next superintendent, you're leaving a large hole as the business manager. When you approach filling that, or filling those shoes, which would also be large shoes, theoretically, big, you know, not big, big shoes to fill, the approach you would take to find and set your team, what you would look for in a candidate, how you would approach the hiring process to ensure that there's no blips or hiccups in the process. And I've been asked to have Mike repeat the questions because people are having a hard time hearing from the different cameras.
Got it, okay. So the question was effectively, if elevated to be superintendent, and you indicated filling Dr. Dozik's shoes are big shoes to fill. Your shoes as the associate superintendent for business and finance would be big shoes to fill. Talk a little bit about what you'll look for in a candidate for your backfill, as well as perhaps a little bit more about how you'll build a team to support the district going forward.
Yeah. I have a pretty good track record in hiring folks. Certainly credentials are a requirement. We want to look at the experience doing similar work. But I am as much or more about work ethic, general personality. I know what our communities, what you all need to have the personality and work ethic to work with. It's a tough job. I've got to tease that out. I am not worried about getting the information to the right candidate. It's finding the right candidate committed to, now yes, sometimes they tell the truth, sometimes they don't, but you know, my hope is with a team, an interview team, to ferret out someone who's going to be committed to this district for a while, because it does take a little bit to learn it, and then you love it. And then, I mean, the variety of committees and towns is actually a perk. So it just takes a while to get there. So I definitely think the right hire is going to be someone who is committed for a decent amount of time, but is an outgoing enough person to be comfortable talking to a lot of different people, be comfortable asking, and quick enough, having enough basic financial or numbers sense to catch on with it. And then I can get them there.
Follow up?
I think you got it. That's
Mrs. Noyes Miller, and I will definitely repeat
Maybe
yours.
the song going there, yeah.
Hopefully, we will be moving beyond COVID at some point and the challenges thereof. What do you consider to be the biggest challenges aside from COVID in the district, and also what are you most excited about?
So the biggest challenges facing the district, COVID aside,
Yep.
and so what are those challenges from your perspective, and of them, what are you most excited about?
Okay. I'm going to go the excited first. I am really excited to start working on the next strategic plan and mission and vision statement. It's been a long time coming. I think we are absolutely at a kind of a crossroads now, and this district is in the prime spot to really plan and think out of the box and have some awesome conversations about what we look like 10 years from now. So that, I think that is what I'm most excited about. That could also be the challenge. You know, sometimes it is hard when you've got that variety of groups and interested parties involved. I think, again, the biggest challenge may be in 2 years financially, where are we? Are our communities stable? Because we've got some huge challenges right now from our communities who want to support, but in some cases can't. And I am very worried about building too many cliffs that we cannot support in 2 or 3 years, which would just be a shame.
You want to follow up, Sheila?
Challenges as far as educationally between the 8 schools.
Educational challenges
Educational,
between
yeah.
the 8 schools.
Yep. Our challenges are always transitioning. So, once we're going to need some work to get caught up and then get back to how I think we have struggled for years, getting that 7th grade to 8th grade and getting that 6th to 7th and 8th to 9th. I think we still have work to do there. We have done a lot of work in recent years at the elementary level to get some consistent materials and curriculum with Go Math, and we've done science and early literacy. It's almost time in another couple of years to revisit math, so that will be a challenge. We do have a challenge having our junior high / middle school, and that is a curriculum challenge where we've got usually kind of the typical middle school is 5, 6, 7, 8. And when we're trying to look at materials and curriculums that we carve out at the elementary school and start over at the junior high, I think that will continue to be a challenge. We've got math to take a look at again.
Yes, sir.
So we've talked a lot about challenges, and you called out a lot of ones that I had questions about. Thank you for that. So my question is, you built a pretty good backlog of challenges here, obviously, be they post-COVID, COVID-related, or the district in itself. What's going to be your thought process to prioritize those challenges to make sure you're working on the right one?
So your thought process around prioritizing the litany of challenges, your approach to how you would prioritize the focus on this.
Yeah. And they're going to have to be student-driven, and some of the priorities will vary by school, depending on what's happening in each school and their student population. So we're absolutely going to need some assessments to figure out what our priorities are, and then we'll work it as an administrative team to set them.
Mr. Goodwin?
What's your philosophy around how to grow talent? We have a lot of talent in our school system. How do we keep that and keep continuing to allow them to grow over years?
Yeah.
So philosophy around growing talent
Yeah.
within the school system.
Yeah, and professional development opportunities is key. It was disappointing the last year or two that we have not been able to have these district-wide professional development opportunities for staff to meet each other and get similar time together. It's been building focused, so I'm really looking forward to getting back to some district opportunities. Internal talent is key, but all the way up. We certainly, our industry, I think, no one wants to be a superintendent. Limited people want to be principals these days because it's tough, and they lose the connection to the kids. So I think our most successes in being able to grow within or foster advancement within is really to look at how can we have these people who just love being with kids. How can we find them roles of advancement and still be able to keep that connection? We say it all the time, we pay it lip service, but it's really hard to deliver. And I think that's key because, most people, they're in this for the kids. And it's hard. There's such wonderful talent, but it's hard to have them pull back a little bit from the kids and share that talent with other people, because having a good, strong administrative team is I think, the success to this district. The good news is, regardless of what seat they're in, for the most part, staff come here and stay. We don't have much turnover at all.
Mrs. Randall.
Jack, you spoke about building a cliff, and to some maybe not home, or maybe on this committee, I'm not really aware of what building a cliff is to each individual town. And then the second part of that is, since our focus will be on mental health, post-COVID recovery, we'll say, SEL, I know that a few of our schools are piloting camps during vacations and summer, continued services in the summer. What would that model look like? Could that be part of our plan for recovery for SEL continuous through the year?
Absolutely, absolutely. We will, without a doubt, be putting together and soon putting out summer opportunities in many different, both academic and general, anything to help foster mental health and get folks feel better coming back. I will say, I'm a little concerned that we actually have funding for programs that we don't have people for. Our staff are tired. I am so worried that we're actually going to be able to put programs out and not be able to staff them, at least for the summer. I'm hopeful. I think our special ed programs, we've already started staffing for the summer, and we are. I'm worried that we've worn our staff out, and when we say, okay, we got these programs, we're ready, that either the staff don't want to do it because they need a break, rightfully so, or even the students who have struggled through this year say, please don't make me go. So that is my worry, but for sure, for the next 2 years, we're going to see programs happening during the summer. We may see unique programs happening in the evenings. We'll see them during vacations, for sure. The cliff I refer to is really a financial cliff. If you put money in, grant money in for 2 years for new positions, and then on year 3, that grant money is gone, that is the cliff. That if we still feel we need it, and our communities continue to be strapped, and my crystal ball only goes out about 1 year. So I cannot guess 2 or 3 years how our communities will have recovered. There are some in real problems with revenue. The hope certainly would be in 2 years they've recovered too, and maybe they can help, or through attrition we have turnover and can keep some of these, but I'm a little worried about bringing on too much staff and then not being able to keep it that way.
Mr. Haggerty.
Mr. Boyd, you touched a few minutes ago about professional development for our teachers, and likewise for our leaders. Professional development is important. Could you share with us just some of the things that you had to do to enhance your professional development?
Yep, absolutely. I have taken courses on SEL and SEI. I've taken special ed courses. I participate regularly in the conferences for both MASS and MASBO, which are the business managers, and they will tend to go different areas. Those courses will run the gamut on social emotional, on academics, on various different curriculums, on safety, school security, SRO, which again, I'm very pleased with the SRO program that we got in a couple of years ago. It took a lot of really good, healthy dialogue, but we got there, and I think it's a great program. I certainly take advantage and look for any professional development opportunity, especially in whatever it is we need to be focusing on for that particular year or half a year.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How do we learn about the best practices of other districts in the state, and what's your thought process on how we can implement those in our district?
Yeah.
So best practices from other districts throughout the state and how we implement them here.
Yeah. At the senior administrative level, there are listservs. One really awesome thing, Massachusetts education anyway, is superintendents, assistant superintendents, they share everything. There is always anything out there you want to know. How do you guys do this? How do you do that? You ask one question, you're going to get at least a dozen responses, maybe more, which is an awesome way to say, how are you doing things, and let's try it. We're also, pre-COVID and post-COVID, very open to sending folks out to meet. We want folks to come in and see what we do and how we do. We spread the word if we think we do something really well. We ask questions if we think we could do it better. As I said, instructional rounds was a best practice I brought here from another school district, which was simply a reach out. It's one of our Central Mass school districts that said, hey, anybody who wants to come, a few of us went. I loved it and brought it back. So it is a great thing about the educational industry that we are always happy to share what we feel we do well and never hesitate to ask what we think we could do better.
One of the things we've often prided ourselves on in this district is that we're a no-fee district. So can you reaffirm your philosophy relative to us continuing to be a no-fee district?
Yep. I take my marching orders from the school committee, but I am so happy they agree with me. It is part of the whole student. The extracurriculars, the clubs, everything that they do beyond academics makes the child. In some cases, it makes them want to come when otherwise they wouldn't. But even in the best of classes, they need something to feed their soul when the day is done. So I am thrilled that this district has always stuck with, and sometimes it's contentious, when you have a pool of dollars sitting there to pay all of those stipends for staff who love to do the extracurricular stuff, thanks goodness. But that is a hefty line item between extra activities and sports, so it does come up on occasion. And our philosophy has been, if it is important enough to offer, then it's important enough to fund. And we sometimes have to make tough decisions within a budget and balance because we just don't want to. Offering fees or charging fees changes the face of the activity. It changes the face of athletics. Even if you put grants in there, it just changes the feel. And that is something that fortunately we've all agreed on is not. We just don't want that fraud district.
Jen.
What is one of your potential weaknesses you have coming into the superintendent's role?
Yeah.
That you think would have to work on?
From the weakness of you from your vantage point.
Sure. One of the perks at this point in time is I know what I don't know. Some people walking in don't know what they don't know. I know what I don't know. I have my short list. I have an expert curriculum assistant superintendent, and I partner with her already and will continue to do so as we dig more into curriculum. There's a couple of superintendent portal or reporting items that I have not done that I certainly will need to delve into. I know many of our special ed programs, I don't know as many regulatory issues. Some of the laws around special ed. I've got an awesome special ed director though. So that is one thing. I've got that kind of little list, and I think I'm pretty fortunate because of my experience in working with my team so far to know what I don't know. So I know what I'm going to head to.
How about you have working with?
Yeah.
Another question would be, what have you learned in the past few years with Dr. Novak is something that you can take moving forward that will help you deal with any kind of a stressful situation as you had over the last few years? How would you approach that? What have you learned?
I'm going to say the number one thing. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I was just going to repeat the question. I want to be sensitive to those at home. The question was, effectively, what have you learned from Dr. Nozick? I learned a lot.
Exactly.
I learn from her every day, so.
I do think what I've learned most from Dr. Nozick is never knee-jerk and act too quick. She is the best at taking the time that's needed to reflect and then respond or then act.
Deb, one of the things you mentioned in your opening statement that I'd like you to expand upon a little bit more, really around relationships, particularly relationships within our 5 towns. Can you talk a little bit about why those are so important, how you've cultivated them over the years, and what the strength of those relationships ultimately help us deliver?
Mm-hmm. So you've got your 2 key bodies in every town, Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. In each of our 5 towns, one takes a stronger role than the other, then building the budget, it actually changes. Lesson to me early on, I thought it was always the finance committee because that is the town I came from and it was the finance committee. They both, in a perfect world, come in on the same page, but not always. But between those two, I certainly, years ago, realized you've got to communicate with them and you do not wait until March when it's time to set up the town meetings. You start that in October. So that is something very early on I have started every single year with all the boards of selectmen and finance committees to reach out to whoever they are, because they change, to introduce ourselves, to let them know what our schedule is, when our public hearings are, and when our budget conversations are, so they can hear it along with us. Some choose to come, some choose not to. If they don't, I'm sending them information the day after the meeting. As a result of that, I have gotten to know a lot of good folks serving their communities. They're there for public service. They're not there for the pay, that's for sure. And I will say in every one of my years, we've gone into town meeting knowing what our ask has been the same as what the town is going to vote. So we're not battling it on town meeting floors. Those of you you have seen other departments battling on town meeting floor. That is never going to be what's best for our kids. The best for our kids is to talk about it ahead, help them understand where the dollars are going. It's not just the bottom line. They've got to understand the programs. They've got to understand what we're adding or taking away and how we're using that money. We owe that to the taxpayers. So having those conversations has paid off. There have been a couple of times where they simply could not support our ask, and I came back to you and said they really can't. Because there's a difference between can't or won't. Won't, we keep pushing and trying to support. But if they simply do not have the money, we cannot ask for it. So I think I've developed a pretty good relationship with any one of those. The town's finance committee or selectmen don't hesitate to give me a call or talk about their numbers and say this is where we are, what we do. The smaller towns, quite frankly, I help them figure out how to get through it. They don't have full-time staff.
Mrs. Bonner?
I know, Deb, that the administration and individual schools have developed relationships with the Board of Health over this past year. And it seems to me that that has been a very positive relationship. Do you foresee that continuing beyond COVID? And also, do you expect that we're going to have to increase the number of nurses and medical staff that we have in the schools?
So relationships relative to Board of Health and that continuing, and I didn't hear the second part of that.
Do you expect to have
More nurses.
More staff in the schools, medical staff?
More health and medical staff in the schools.
Yeah. There are certainly some schools, and we've already addressed that at the junior high level, to put a nurse assistant in, and that is in the regular budget for next year, even though it was grant funded this year. Not sure where it'll land, but it is certainly something that we need to continue to support and keep. So each school does vary. We've tried really hard to look at the staffing in each school and keep up with what the needs are. So we're really going to have to evaluate. This year we brought on as many subs. We promised permanent subs. Anybody we could get from nursing, we gave jobs to. They're hard to find. That's another actual summer concern when we're putting programs together.
Right.
Getting nursing support for the summer is another concern. I need to back up. I missed the first part. Was nursing? Oh, Board of Health. Board of Health. Yeah, I hope we do continue with those. We definitely have built stronger relationships in some towns more than others, but it's a great relationship to have. It's a great resource. Prior to this, Boards of Health would come and do a couple of annual inspections, and that would be it. I think it's a great opportunity to build on. And a couple of our communities don't have a really strong Board of Health, but again, our communities aren't are happy to help each other out. We've certainly had cases this year where we had a Board of Health representative from one town helping because the other town either didn't have an active one or wasn't able to get a hold of it. So I do think that that's a great opportunity that we should absolutely take advantage of.
Other questions? Mrs. Boyd, I'll give you the floor back to offer any final remarks.
Thank you so much for hearing me out. I hope you all heard me, and I do have some French in me. So there is nothing I can do about it. I have tried. I do thank you. I think this is it's a difficult decision and process in a normal year. And I know this year has just exacerbated things. But I do feel, because of where we are right now, that I am in the best position to keep us going. And again, I love this. I love these communities. I am a resident of our 5 towns. That could be good. That could be not good sometimes. It's hard to escape if you want to, but I have been here for a long time. My family, some of them are here, some of them are not, but I have 2 kids that are warriors, true and true. My husband graduated from Tantasqua. I'm very excited at the prospect of leading us into our next decade. So I appreciate you hearing me out.
Final questions? Thank you, Mrs. Boyd.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll recognize Mrs. Alexander to offer the interview committee report.
The interview committee is pleased to recommend Mrs. Debra Boyd as the next superintendent of the Tantasqua and Union 61 school districts. Experience that was critical in factoring this decision. Multiple school district-wide leadership experiences, knowledge of our central office and the complexities that go with the 6-district school system, strong relationships of elected and appointed officials in all 5 of our towns, a solid understanding of the district's curricular and co-curricular programs, the ability to build strong and diverse teams of leaders and educators, a deep understanding of both school and town finances as well as their bylaws and policies, solid instructional rounds, commitment to our most at-risk students, and experience in hiring sound administrators. Critical risk management experience, including COVID but not limited to. Negotiations, personnel, and sound policy management experience. Excellent understanding of federal and state educational standards, various standardized testing, and the interpretation of benchmarks and what that means to the district. Lastly, the committees have always cherished a partner in their superintendent over her 20 years working for this district. Mrs. Boyd's reputation precedes her. For all of the reasons above, it is my pleasure to make the motion that we appoint Debra Boyd the next superintendent of the Tantasqua and Union 61 school districts, effective January 1st, 2022, and instruct Chairman Valenzola to begin the process of negotiating a contract with Mrs. Boyd.
Second the motion.
Motion's been made by Mrs. Alexander, seconded by Mr. Haggerty. Mrs. Alexander, anything else you'd like to add?
Not at this time.
We'll open the floor for discussion. Anybody else from the interview committee wish to speak? Mrs. Randall?
I would like to say that during our interview process, Mrs. Boyd has numerous experience in all aspects of being the superintendent. She spearheaded our pathways program in our school at Burgess and supported it at the high school and junior high level. These are for our special needs students that we service till they're 22, and she's been instrumental in keeping them in our district with their peers, with their neighbors, keeping the connections they've made in our communities. And to that, I don't know of any other district that has invested time, resources, money, staffing, but love for these students like she does. It's exceptional. We are a very unique school district. And and we're very blessed to have this program to keep these students where we need them.
Thank you, Mrs. Brandel. Mrs. Monaco?
Oh. No, nothing.
Further discussion? Mr. Haggerty?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of serving on the Regional District Committee for 16 years now. And during that period of time, I've had the opportunity to interact with most administrators, our superintendent, and Mrs. Boyd in a variety of subcommittees, including building and plant, including bylaws and policies. And I've always found her to be extremely committed, resourceful, a person who studies hard and comes up with reasonable resolutions to issues. I particularly am reminded of an insignificant, perhaps, incident this last August as I was on the negotiating team that was meeting with the teachers to reach a memorandum of understanding with respect to opening school. And they would come in and they would pose a number of things that they considered potential obstacles to opening school. One of them was an error of, I think, in communication, but there was no sanitizers in the classrooms, and this was back in August before we opened. And the next day, I happened to go to the office to sign some warrant articles, and there in the office was boxes and boxes and boxes of sanitizer. She had gone out the next day and I think cleaned the town of Sturbridge out of all of its sanitizers. Now that may not be significant, and someone will say, what's that have to do with the job? But that's the type of person that she is, that she's going to get the job done. She's going to do what is necessary to get the job done. I've heard that it said that she does not have the educational background. And you know what? One of the things that I think is important about the Tantasqua Regional School District, and I think it comes through repeatedly in terms of evaluations of our schools, is that the leaders of our schools are the principals. They're the ones that provide the educational leadership. The superintendent provides the support for that. She isn't the educational leader, not in this day and age. It's the building principals where the action is. So I don't have the least bit problem in supporting her employment by us, and certainly hope that the committee would concur with that.
Mr. Haggerty? Mr. Gillen?
No, I didn't
Oh,
have.
you run out. Give the Pat, go ahead, Pat.
She alluded to bringing back the joy, and I think that's what all of us have felt over the past year. I know my grandchildren have felt that way. Deb is filled with joy, and she'll pass it around. She is wonderful and energetic, and that's what for this time.
Mr. Gillen?
So throughout the whole process, the last year, she makes a lot of points, talks about a lot of different things. And one of the big things that stood out to me during the process, and throughout the time I've interacted with her at the college level, kind of negotiation, national level, and different things, is she has a leadership style that I appreciate. She has passion, but she is always ready to make a hard decision, whether it be on personnel or finances. She gets to the end result. The end result is what's best for the district and the children.
Okay. I have a few points that I just wanted to make. So just to sort of piggyback on what you said, Eli, is she does already have solid relationships, with both the school committees and also our community leaders in 5 different towns. But she's a highly effective communicator. The superintendent is often called upon to be the spokesperson for this district, and I think, she was joking that she tries to be Sally's sunshine, and she does bring a lot of joy, and that's evident, but she's also got that quality that I really appreciate of just brutal honesty. She's not going to sugarcoat it. When you need honest answers, she's going to give them to you, and I truly appreciate that, when she's asked a question, she's going to give you sort of the straight talk, and it may not be exactly what you want to hear, but it is the brutal truth, so I appreciate that. I also think she touched upon how I think she was talking about the district, like hitting the ground running, but I really feel that with her at the helm, she will be able to hit the ground running. She knows the intricacies of the job, not just of what a superintendent is supposed to do, but what this superintendent is supposed to do, and that's something that's really unique to this district, so I think that's incredibly important. And I think, the last thing I wanted to touch on is, for me, I'm a firm believer in it starts with why. And I think Mrs. Boyd really wants to be superintendent now because she thinks it's what's best for the district. And I would have to say that I agree.
Ms. Cumming? Ms. Alexander?
Yes, one thing that might be a little bit redundant to some of the things that the others have said is that I feel that we're incredibly lucky to have this candidate. I joke around about being one of the old ladies on this committee. I'm in my 17th year, older than Mr. Hagley.
Built by you.
And one of the things that I've seen in the 4 searches for superintendents is when you have an internal candidate that understands the intricacies of your 6 school districts, your 5 towns, and all of these committees that we've talked about, FinCom, Board of Selectmen, I don't think that you can overvalue what those relationships and an understanding of how diverse every one of our buildings, our staff, every one of those building staff are. And I feel like we are incredibly lucky, and I would impress upon us that we are just so lucky that we have somebody that is ready to hit the ground running with the passion and the joy that they have for this district. And so for that, I feel that we're incredibly lucky that we have a candidate that is ready to go.
Ms. Alexander? Further discussion? I'd like to take a moment, sorry? No? Next day, I'd like to take a moment to thank Mrs. Carboni and Mrs. Pelly for their service throughout this process. We have a wonderful partnership and relationship with both. Ms. Carboni, you've been a wonderful representative of your membership. We're very lucky to have you.
Thank you so much.
Someone with your credentials.
Thank you.
We appreciate your service in this endeavor. Back here to you as well, really representing the administrative point of view. It's wonderful to have people in the boat in the process. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. First, I'll call the vote for Tantasqua. Those in favor of the motion will raise your green cards. Raise them high. Keep them up. Okay. Opposed for Tantasqua? Those in favor from the union, please raise your yellow cards. Opposed from the union? Let the record state that both Tantasqua and Union 61 have voted unanimously in the affirmative. And congratulations to Mrs. Debra Boyd on her appointment to be our next superintendent. And a special thank you once again publicly to Dr. Erin Milzik, a friend, colleague, a partner to all of us. We're so glad we've got multiple months more with her. But a special thank you for Dr. entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Mrs. Alexander, seconded by Mrs. Cunningham. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, will say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, everybody, so much. And to those watching, thank you so much.
Return these.
You can leave your placards on the table.